today I want to talk through maximizing what zero-party data is. We're going to talk through exactly what that means, exactly how you can do this, and like what this looks like, because it's very elusive to some people of like, we've talked so much about maximizing what like our privacy, our consent, our things, all these different pieces, but no one talks a lot about like what to do once you have this like really juicy consented data that you can then utilize to take an action. And that's where people get really like, that's like the crux of the conversation here. So my name is JJ Reynolds. We work with everybody from self-starters through large enterprises. We manage their data. I live in Reno, Nevada, so I'm in the US. If anybody comes to Reno, Nevada, which is next to Lake Tahoe, come through, say hello. Really passionate about volleyball. Bonus points if you play volleyball. That is my personal email there, jj@visionlabs.com. So if you have any questions at all about whatever I'm talking about, would love to hear from you there. So why trust us? Here's a couple of our companies that we work with, everything from really big enterprises to smaller 10-person teams. So we have the breadth of experience talking about international kind of privacy versus what you do on a day-to-day basis. So here is my only disclosure of the day. I am not a lawyer. I'm sure this has happened before, but take everything here with a non-lawyer grain of salt. I'm out here just a lonely data person fishing in the data lake, and you can take with it what you would like, but hopefully you can take a lot of actions of what you can take away here. So what we normally say to clients and customers and ourselves is you paint the target and we will hit it, right? That's the common thing is saying, hey, we're not a lawyer. We can advise you where the target will be. We'll tell you, hey, it's a dumb place to put a target. Don't put it in front of a car or a person, but we will hit it. And so we'll throw our laptops at the target. We will hit the target where the lawyers say to hit. Once you do that, right? Once everything's been said, I'm going to assume you've listened to all the rest of these amazing talks, and now you understand how like server side and tag manager and all these pieces work together. What really we want to try to avoid is this conversation right here, is where one person, let's just call them the CEO for the lack of a better person standing in, that says we need everything. That then says, what are we trying to do? And that's the question that our team constantly is asking is like, what are we trying to do here? And that can be everything from what is this page supposed to do in a browser? What is this automation supposed to do in an automation? What is the business model at a whole trying to accomplish? You can have everything from a break-even cost per acquisition to we need to have a 90-day LTV that is 3x what our CPA is. What are we trying to do? And we want to get as granular as possible. The most common response is we aren't sure, right? We're like, no, everyone's like, I don't know. And you're like, great. Then we come and say, here's what we think that you're saying when you say what you're trying to achieve. And then it goes back to we need everything. And I'm sure everybody here, like the we need everything is a little bit problematic because not everyone needs everything. So what is zero-party data? When it comes to say we need everything, let's just clarify a few terms so that we know, at least for the sake of my semantics, what we're talking about. I'm going to define zero-party data as this simple statement. It's information people willingly give to you. So this is your form submissions. This is your purchases. This is your surveys, okay? So these are the type of things where you say, hey, can you fill out this survey? I would really like to know exactly what we're talking about here so we can get off to the races, right? Then your next question is probably like, what the heck is a first party, right? So information people willingly give you. First party is usually information collected directly by a company from its customers and audiences. So just for example here, there's like first party data when it comes to browsers. Everyone's kind of heard of that. I don't know why they call parties because everybody is not associating cookies with parties, but there's first party where it's on your actual domain, sending data to yourself. Second party is someone else's first party data. So you kind of share data between organizations. A really common thought of a second party is when you transact lists, like email lists, where you have someone consenting data and another person who's sharing that either through a partnership or agreement. And then third party, which is someone else collecting information related to something else. And so here is our line of sketchiness when it comes to what is actually happening behind the scenes, right? So zero party is you know what you're doing. Third party, you're like kind of, here's the essence of a plan that someone might have. Put this JavaScript on your site, we'll figure it out. So this is the usual problem that most people come into accounts with when you come to zero party data is There are tools galore out there, and nothing is talking to each other. That's the biggest problem. So we have a CRM that you might have, which has transactions and emails, and maybe you have some extra information. Then you have something like a web analytics tool, or you have a Google Analytics or things like that, where you're like collecting this kind of more trend and pattern based approaches. You might have screen recordings. Microsoft Clarity is on the market, and you can like send user IDs sometimes, but you can't send emails, but you can kind of do that. And so you have this screen recording tool. I'll just use Clarity for the example here. We then have our forms on our website. So think of like lead captures, and maybe that goes to your CRM. Maybe there's an autoresponder somewhere else. Maybe you're a sales team and Calendly booking calls. And so what happens is this, right? Where you say, hey, we've got a lead. And then from a like privacy slash logistics standpoint, who knows about it? Okay, did we tell Google? Did we tell Facebook? Did we tell Clarity that this event happened? Did we tell our CRM? Is that a tag or is that a function? Is that an automation? What is it? How do we know where it is? And so now you end up with this like circular thing where everyone's chasing what's happening. And then what happens is now what? Okay, what happens now? And that is the problem we want to try and solve is like who knows about it and what now? So the other like just kind of more privacy centered, I added this just for the sake of this talk, is we got a deletion requests. What do we delete? That's a whole other framing. I want to talk more about what we do with that information as opposed to what we delete, because what we do is more fun. Uh, but here's the exact problem we set out to solve. And this is the way that we kind of framed this conversation is we want to unify the data so it's easier to see. Okay. So when you have the we got a lead question, we know where to go to see that thing across everything. I'm talking screen recording, I'm talking forms, I'm talking everything. How do we do that in a very simple way, right? So we want easier to see. We want to systemize how a user is a user, right? So you have this idea of users on a website, users of your application, users inside of your CRM. I'm sure everyone feels that they're paying too much money for whatever CRM they're currently paying because they have too many users. And we want to match consent with its essence. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we get really caught up in the idea of the browser, right? So we say, hey, when this form is submitted, did we do a server-side tag manager request cleaning that we hashed it correctly and the double helix hashing? And then we want to make sure that we have the consent status flagged correctly. But what happens when like you have a screen recording that's recording it and you have a form submission with their actual email and then you have a web container that's consent management, that's cookie blocking? You'd have all these pieces that are very hard to make sure they're all singing the same tune, okay? And that is very, very problematic in the long run. So what we did is we created this thing that we call the data order of operations. Okay. So this is 9 different steps in general that every organization needs to do, starting at the bottom and working their way up. Like think of it like building a pyramid where you kind of have to do the first one. It's the most important. And then how to do the second one. And then the third one, and then the fourth one, and the fifth one, and the sixth one, and the seventh one, and the eighth one, and the ninth one. So there's 9 steps. And each step builds on the previous one. But your goal should be is that you can unify this together so that you either know who a person is or you don't know, like you would have them anonymously, but you know what's happening. If you guys want a copy and a little mini training that I made, or a company made over at visionlabs.com/DOO, the data order of operations, you can go grab that. The way you can think about this is that you have at the bottom your conversion tracking. So that's like your browsers, your CRM is how do you know a lead happened, right? And then how do you know a form was submitted, right? And then we have our screen recording. So that's more along those lines. We then have our forms. We have our CRM, and we can move up with our line there. And what we want to try and do is say, hey, we know of one location to look. We have one system to use. We know exactly what to do once we have that. So how we can really structure that is we define the outcomes. And I'm gonna take a sip here of some coffee while we think about the outcomes of your data. So think really quickly about what are the outcomes of your data, whether that's first party data, second party, zero party, all the parties, whether it's a giant party. What are the outcomes? Just think about that for a second. Okay, now that you have that in your head, you know exactly what the outcomes are. Here are the 3 outcomes that I would recommend that you try to think about of like, once we have these form submissions, how do we take action on them? And these are the only 3. There's maybe a fourth one that's optional here. Is option one is we can field useful questions. By useful, I mean you can do something with it, right? I'm not talking how many users do we have in Gibraltar, right? Not the most helpful thing. But we have new questions and existing ongoing questions. We need to field those. So if we do a form, right? If we say, "Hey, fill out the survey," we need to know what the action will be about that survey. When we need to drive data pipelines, so that could be ad platforms, marketing automations, and your systems. Most people don't think about this when it comes to data, whether that's first party or third party or second party or first party, the entire party, right? Uh, how are we using this data to either automatically or systematically improve the entire system, right? Send an email, add a push notification, do a thing. And lastly is take an impactful action. So in general is we want to say, what is the outcome of all this effort that we're doing? Most people don't even know. They're just chasing down GDPR compliancy for the sake of GDPR compliancy, but there's no actual action, right? We need to, the whole point of data is to do something with it. You can't just look at it and say, cool, it's there. Most people try to stop there, but we want to take it a step further and say, what can we actually do? DOO, data order of operations. So here is what we're gonna, oopsies, we have some automations out of order. Oops, well, imagine that that went in order and then the thing was first and we look at the red dots. So here is how we structure this. This is what you can do. Take a screenshot, tell your boss, here's the general idea, is that you have all of these inputs, right? That's your CRM, your product, your sales, screen recordings, feedback, CRM data, form submissions, you name it. And you want to feed that into something that can unify that. Personally, we're big fans of this tool called PostHog. Uh, there are other tools like, for example, Segment is a big one on the block. It's just really expensive, and like most companies, unless you're like a big budget company that you're just willing to throw money for ease, then there's Segment, RudderStack. You get the idea. PostHog is a big fan. They also have some cute branding, so branding nerds go out there. So, how does this work? We have Google Tag Manager, for example, as the tag management system on your website. We can use some really fancy server-side tagging if you'd like to. Doesn't really matter. We then pass that data on to something that can unify this information. That's I'm just going to use PostHog for this example. Then we have the green arrows, right? And that is where we can say, what do we do with this information? I looked at a couple of examples here at the top. So we have feeding the ad platforms. I know everyone gets really wonky about that, but if you have a bunch of surveys that you can normalize, you then can say, hey, this type of person is the best person to go after there. We then have emails, right? So we can send out emails to people that do the thing that we want them to do or are on the path to do the thing that we want them to do. We have cohorts to say these people are more likely to do this thing. We have identifying opportunities. So we could say, hey, we should be doing an event about X. It's very important. We want to make sure that we really have a clear path for that. And then lastly, at the bottom of ads, which is at the top. And so the red things are we make sure that we have the consent to store this, right? So I'm talking about consent here. And that's the beauty of this entire system is that if you use all the different tactics people talk about of managing your having a cookie bot and having a cookie management system and you use server-side tagging to clean the data and make sure you have consent, make sure you know who you can email and make sure your forms have a consent. All of this information, if you can feed it in correctly, you now can use that data to then do it. And also, whenever someone asks you to delete it, you now can delete them everywhere. You can delete your screen recordings. You can delete your sales pipelines. You can delete your products. If it gets to that extreme, you can do that. So that's the little ingestion part. The green little boxes are actions, right? When take actions. And then what we do, our kind of recommendation here is that you centralize that data in something like Google BigQuery, and then you plug Looker Studio in. So you've got the full system at your control, and you have 100% control of this because you own everything. You own the Looker Studio report, you own the BigQuery warehouse, you own your tag management system, you own your CDP. All of it you own, and you are just choosing to send what you would like on to other people. So, pop quiz. I'm not sure if there's a chat here, but if you are chat ready, write down in the chat wherever you are, get ready, arm your chat. And I'm not a lawyer. Are screen recordings compliant? That is the question. that I would like to ask. So you can give me a yes, a no, embellish your answer. I don't have an idea, so people are saying yes, no. Um, and it's a very hot topic, I will say. We've had teams that we've come into say, hey guys, let's do this. And there is on one side vehemently no. The other side vehemently yes. So how do we know? And I'm going to make a case here. I'm not a lawyer, so my case might have holes in it. It might be a Swiss cheese case, but I'm going to go to I'm going to hope for a sharp cheddar case where there's no holes at all. So, oh wait, I'm just going to read off a couple of these in case someone's watching the recording. So we've got a no. We've got a no if made by ad networks for like Microsoft. Not if you read the text and customer data. So these are all very nerdy answers because we got a lot of nerds people here. So good job, everybody. Uh, this is the way that I want to like try and frame this. Again, keep writing your answers in, guys. Don't get scared by the people that are writing no's. You can go yes. I'd love to hear a yes. Um, is that you have all of these ingredients, right? That are either ranging from first party or zero party of like saying that you have consent to collect the thing, all the way to third party. And you have all these ingredients, and I want you to think about how do you combine these ingredients into insights, automations, and reporting. That's what you want to combine them into. And all you have to know is do you have consent to do something? And that consent question is you can ask your lawyers about, right, depending where you live in the world. And I'll give you my takes here in a second. But that's what I want you to think about this, is that all these pieces of data are ingredients. Any one is useful, right? You can always eat a can of tuna, right? It's an ingredient. You can eat a can of tuna. It's okay. You're not going to kill you. But if you combine that with some mayonnaise and some salt and some pepper and some other things, you can make a really great sandwich. And you have some bread, right? And that's a much better thing. So I just want to implore you to think about it like that. So here is my thought, is that consent and legitimate reason go hand in hand. Okay, I've said it here first. If you have a legitimate reason to capture a screen recording, then I think you can make a case. Again, not a lawyer, not a lawyer. You can make a case for why you should have screen recordings, and you can choose one that's compliant, right? Like I personally really enjoy the post-hog screen recordings because A, it's not sending data to Microsoft or sending data to Google or sending data to some other thing. It's a third party. It's not a interested party in selling your data for advertising. And so I would like to make the case, Swiss cheese or cheddar, of that if you have a legitimate reason, you can make a case to do that. But I will say, most teams don't even think about what the legitimate reason is. They just want to turn everything on, back to our initial conversation of saying, hey, we need everything, but you don't need everything. So I want you to make a case of why do you need this information? And that's why the action, the outcome of using the data to take an action is so important. Most people just get stuck on like, let's have data, let's set up Google Analytics, let's set up this to do GDPR or whatever else, but no one knows why. Like, what are we going to do with this information? And once you can map that information to everything that we need to say, what are you trying to do? And you have a very clear action. That's step 3 of the data order of operations, if you're going to download that. And then we say we aren't sure, but we now know what we're trying to do. And then here is what we think you need, right? So your team is now structuring questions back to everybody. And you say, hey, here's why we think this is an outcome. Then we can say why we do or don't need almost everything. So back to the ingredients. Have you ever made cookies and you don't have something? And then the automatic Google search is saying, hey, can I use, what can I use in place of eggs? Fun fact, you can use applesauce in place of eggs, and it's not that bad. Okay, it's pretty good. And so you can swap things out, right? If your team says, hey, we cannot send webhooks when someone becomes a lead to our CDP, not allowed, or we have to ask them to consent with a form. That's okay, right? You can swap out eggs for applesauce and say, hey, we have another way of using this data that we now have consent to do. And it's a yin and yang game. You have to say, what are we going to do with this information? Because, and again, back to the 3 points, it's like insights, right? Automations, and reporting are the things that you want to try and drive. And however you get there, it doesn't really matter, right? So that's what's happening. this is where most people overcomplicate things. And I could sit here and talk your ear off about how you can use server-side tagging to reverse engineer the super cool consent management system that listens to the browser and takes into its consent cookie bot and then pings your CRM to get their previous consent and change. No one cares, right? It does not. It's so nerdy. Just pay someone to do it. Like contact us, contact someone else, and say, hey, we want to be this compliant. You paint the target, someone will hit it. That's how you solve consent. But what you want to try and do, if people are taking actions currently off of random acts of marketing, you're just doing things out the wazoo, and you start overcomplicating things. You're like, we need to have this really advanced thing. We need to have this whatever. Like, oh my gosh, we need to have this server-side compliant tracking, double helix, reverse engineered thing, and you overcomplicate it, and then you end up the best brands that work like we try to move people here as quickly as possible is saying how do we take actions that are so automatic that either our reporting fuels the team, that our team can then take an action, or the system takes an action on our behalf, right? Like, so you say, hey, when someone enters this cohort, we do this thing. When someone is in the high intent stage, because we know all of these pieces, all these ingredients that we put together, we then do this thing. And most people don't think about what the actual action is. They're just so focused on the consent or the super nerdy stuff that you get overcomplicating it, and then you don't know what to do. And I've been there. I've made things so complicated that I'm like, why are we doing this? And I don't know. So we want to try and go from here to there as quickly as possible. You will get things complicated, and that's okay. But you want to move there as fast as you possibly can. So ask yourself, what are we trying to do? Okay. This is the most important thing is like, what are we trying to do? And get as granular as you can. I'm going to tell you a story really quickly about what we did with one of our clients is they had this really complex multi-location website, right? They had like 120 domains. They had funnels out the wazoo, call to actions everywhere, and it was just kind of a mess. Like they're a big enough organization that the mess had some meaning, right? It's a meaningful mess, but you're like, we're still in a mess. We understand how we got here. But if you can get as granular as you can, is okay, where are we trying to get people to go? Start at the end. Is we want people to book calls with our sales team. Cool. How? Do we want them to download PDFs first? Do we want them to try and get them from the website directly to book a call? Do we want to try and get them to experience what we're selling first? It really does come down to what are you trying to do and as granular as you can get. So I always recommend people use a web like a whiteboarding tool where you can say, hey, this is what we're trying to do is we are trying to have people go from here and you draw little arrows and they're going to go here. And you can build this ideal plan, right? It's going to go away. You're going to have problems in the future, but you can build that ideal plan and you always work towards that. Had something fall. All right. And so now you can go get the information, right? You can say, hey, we are going to try and move from here of we don't know what we're doing and why we're collecting this information to a place that says, hey, we now know what we're going to try and do and how we're going to get there. Think groceries, not a hoarder, right? That's think groceries, not hoarding, and then use this idea. Like take a screenshot of this, or go download it, visionlabs.com/DOO, and start at your conversion tracking. Write it down. We have a nice little Google sheet to help you through this of like how do we do each of these steps in a way that makes a lot of sense. And there's three core things that you can and ultimately do. There's not a lot of woo-woo magic behind the scenes. Like there is, I'll tell you it, but it's you have insights, right? You have automations, and then you have like reported. Like, that's basically it. And so like an insight is like, hey, which lead manager is driving the highest adoptions? Bam, bam. There's a question, there's the answer. I can know go get that answer. We then have like correlations, right? So high value to high LTV, like which content or features drive the highest 90-day LTV. Or you have saying, hey, send emails immediately after valuable actions, or we want to improve the user experience, right? These are ideas that you can use to do that. So how is the question? And this is where we want to like look at things and say, hey, this is the loose structure, right? Everything's more complicated once you start getting into it, but I can make a cute presentation that hopefully makes you understand where we're going. We have things driving to a central location where you can take actions. This is where we want to say first, I want you to map the blue, folks. Okay, so what does this page do? What does this automation do? Why did what this lead magnet does that? This webinar does that. I want you to say, hey, this is what we're trying to do at every step, and how can we map that to a centralized location? Think of like what do we do to know if this is successful? Most people have no idea what success looks like for their automations, for their pages, for their site. They might have a general idea of like, hey, we're at a 3% conversion rate, but you want to get granular, more granular than that, because that's where you can find the insights and the actions and the automations that you can take is when someone's exploring your pricing or exploring your product and you have that information to take an action on. Oof, guys, the doors open and the insights just start popping out. So, um, those are the ideas. Again, start at the bottom, work your way up. I'm not sure why that's there again. People often ask about technology, right? There's so many people that are like, now, how do we do this? I need to technology things. Segment is a CDP. It's the big player on the block, right? They have a lot of market share. They're expensive. We have Adobe, right? They have the value CVJ, customer value journey. Then there's Posthog that like. It's a new kid on the block. It's more nerdy. It's more meant for like the startup size, but like we're finding a lot of companies getting a lot of value out of it. They also have a cute little like little hedgehog. So like, how can you not like that, right? So that's a little thing there. And if you do need help with this, send me an email, JJ at Vision Labs. We'll help you get there as fast as we can. This is the marketing idea, right? So this is where people say, hey, this is on our website. I just took a screenshot of that, right? Because this is what the pretty version looks like. So there's a scale here of what does this look like in a pretty version? That is this. This is pretty, where you're like, hey, your team, the marketing director, the VP, the growth, the marketing person. You then have data. You then have a warehouse. You then have your analytics or data team. That's where Vision Labs is on this picture. We then have dashboards. We have async Slack. We have calls. We have automations. All of these things fuel together to build this little data stack, right? But there's people, there's humans in the loop, and that's what guides better outcomes, is because you can say, what are we trying to do, and try and guide a better way to achieve that outcome. This is the pretty version, right? Just swap out Vision Labs with your team in this example of like, hey, here's our data team, here's our data person, here's Frank who manages all this stuff. But this is what they should be doing, right? And the question I want you to always ask yourself is, what will we do with this information? Back to the screen recordings, what will you do with that? Back to the idea of saying, do we have consent? What will we do with this? If you don't know, I would argue, don't even collect it. You don't have the acumen of marketing or product or whatever you're taking action on to action that information of screen recordings or logs or of these things. Like you don't know what to do with it. You have to up your marketing prowess so that you know what to do with it. So you're saying, I actually need these screen recordings and heat maps so we can improve the user adoptability of this. I know people will say it's a slippery slope, right? I can always justify anything. But if you are actually taking action, it makes it a lot easier to say why we're doing this, from like a moral point of view of saying, hey, like we are doing this to make our product the best possible. And the best possible means that people are using it, getting high utility and high value and high outcomes. What happens a lot, this is a screenshot of our dashboard for our internal Vision Labs, right? Is where we have every single lead magnet and we have every single people who saw the lead magnet, who downloaded the lead magnet. If you look there, number 4 down the page on this, whatever day this was, you can see that our data order of operations spreadsheet is a 39% conversion rate. So there's the stat, folks. Go and boost that up. If you go to the page, download it so I can boost these numbers. But what you say is, now what? Right? If I show this to you, you're like, cool. What I'm seeing is that we're down in sessions, we're down in impressions, we're down in leads, and our conversion rate is kind of up, but not compared to last year. So, but I know, like as the CEO over here at Vision Labs, is that our lead quality is going up and up and up because our content is getting more specific to people that can actually do something with it, right? And so that is an insight that is hard to represent in a dashboard, right? It's hard. You have to have, what are we trying to do, and what is the outcome of the thing that you're trying to do? Whether that's zero-party data or first-party data, it doesn't matter. If I click on any single one of these leads names, I can see all the people who downloaded that thing because it's pulling from our CRM and blending that with our analytics platform. So we can see, hey, here are people that consented, gave us their email, and here are the people that are the ones that saw it. All right. Outcomes of your data, folks. Pop quiz. Field useful questions. Drive data pipelines. Impactful actions. If you can do those three and you can justify why, you will have green check marks. Try to think about this of how do you ingest product? How do you take actions? What are the actions you can take automatically, systematically, programmatically? Hey, that's a cool three. I don't think I've said that before. And lastly is what what is now green is what do people want to do that is contact high, medium, low, understand what to do now, drive impactful actions downstream so that you can say, hey, we know what we're doing. And lastly, here is that screenshot one more time. This is what you want to try and achieve. Take a screenshot. This is where Vision Labs fits in. And if you know what you're trying to do, if you can map to those questions to actions, and you can, you now know what you're going to see, like now what, you can answer the question, now what, that you have screen recordings, you will be so much better off. The consent is amazing, right? People need to, like, we need to focus about consent. Everyone needs to understand how consent works on the internet. But if you can't say what we're going to do with that information, and you can answer the question, now what, I'll just say just turn it off. Just turn off your web analytics. Just turn it off and focus on the things that you can actually take action on. That's my hot take. So, if you do have any questions about this, this is this general system that we do recommend where you do have a single source of truth. You have daily updated about either your profit or your structure of your actual business metrics. And then you have constant unbiased feedback from a team. That's where Vision Labs fits into the equation. And the last thing I'll say here is if you do want an audit and a custom action plan on how to map your data into an order of operations that you can actually act on. We have a 4-week audit and action plan creation that we work with your team every single week. We build things out, we review, we test, we execute, and we build out a giant doc to share with your team that is honestly amazing. Hit us up on a contact. And now, 2 minutes behind schedule. Are there any questions at all? And I think I know what the questions are. I already have a couple of them in my mind that I always get, but I would love to hear any questions that you have about any of the pieces that I talked with. I know I went quickly. I know I talked quickly, and I hope there's a recording that you can watch at 0.75 speed because I get really excited about people taking action and not just looking at things, because looking at things basically just helps you. So if you do have a question, drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I will keep talking here after I drink this coffee.
JG, I'll ask a question whilst we wait for people to
Yeah.
type something. So just firstly on that the question about session recording at the start, I was going to say, and this is a bit of a kind of unexpected answer. It depends in the sense that like taking the example of Microsoft Clarity, well, actually, it's not a great example because obviously it's built by ad network, but they do have additional options on there where they can kind of you can turn on strict mode and make it a bit more kind of almost like safer to use. And the same with kind of adding inline suppress sort of fields. That I just both on the field collection and also the other one is like synchronizing the consent with the CDP. So you mentioned about post hog and segment. I've seen, and actually I've seen this with Klaviyo actually as well, where a lot of times people will just put Klaviyo or MailChimp on a site or CDP and forget to then integrate like the consent buttons, like the email, like they might do the standard kind of like cookie banner, but then they forget later down the line to get the like remember the newsletter opt in or opt out, or maybe there's a warranty registration form and there's like a tick box for newsletter, and it's kind of like they need to count all of those points and send it into the CDP. So it's kind of a central kind of almost like system for not just managing the customer, but managing the communication with them. So is that something that the top of your kind of like data flow, is that something you'd also recommend?
Yeah, and like again on the screen recording, I just love the topic because it's just it's like the most hot topic because everyone with events, it's like an event, who cares? But then the second that you have a screen recording, everyone starts to think about it more. And the way I'd say that, like Phil, is like if you have a reason to do it legitimately, like then you can collect it. And I'd say the most of the time, like don't like most screen recordings, like don't collect the fields that you input. Like if you input user fields, and don't collect like credit card numbers, right? Like all those types of things. But there are even ones that like you can turn on, like again, hyper strict. It just depends on what your use case is, where you don't collect images. right? You don't even see the images that someone is viewing, and you just see the text, or you just see a wireframe. We've done one where it's so strict, where it basically just a wireframe of a page, and you know what page they're on, and you know what the loose wireframe is, but you don't see the content. And you could kind of like reverse engineer it if you wanted to, but it's basically just like a wireframe of like image here, text block here, a big form here. And so you can always, it's a sliding scale of what you want to collect or not collect.
Yeah, and I think, and we've sometimes like with the sampling on the session recording tools, because you don't normally need like 100% sample. So we sometimes set it down to maybe a 10% sample, or track key kind of areas of the site. But one thing that we've sometimes done, especially on US sites, is collect the kind of global privacy control kind of signal, bit like what used to be do not track, and we make sure with those we never like we almost do the opt out of session recording, just to kind of be on the safe side. But yeah, on that note, we've also used one called Jam, which is kind of like for developers, and it's quite cool. It's if you're ever trying to submit a bug report, it reports the console, JavaScript errors, and you get the screen recording. So, like for an analyst or a developer, it's really quite helpful. I know obviously it's not designed for consumers, but for me, that's kind of like an obvious use case because it's like, it makes the process quicker, faster, better, and there's a value in me like sharing or like B2B kind of recording with like someone internally.
Yeah, that's exactly why we like personally post hog is because you have all of those pieces. You can collect the like the server logs of like what is happening on your site or like the network requests. Like it's like a developer centric tool. And so you can say, hey, we had a problem. Like this user was trying to submit this form and they clicked it 1,000 times. And like you don't just see a rage click, right? That's where most things stop. You see the actual like network request that's happening behind the scenes. And then you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is so useful because we know why there's a problem and it's not the user's fault even if you blurred everything out, right? You see they're like smashing the rage click and you're like, "Okay, they're doing all these network requests like our form is broken or it's we know that our forms take 7 seconds to submit because of whatever who knows what." Um and so like I think that's where you can really start to say, hey, we have a useful reason for this. And that's where I like really want to push people is like everyone gets so caught up, like I said, in the consent of things. But like, why are you even collecting it to begin with? And if you can answer that question hyper clearly with very specific clarity, it makes it so much easier to like have that conversation with a legal team or with a hype like a technical team to say, why are we collecting this? Why are we blurring out the credit card number? You're like, well, we don't need the credit card number on the screen recording. Like that's probably like over, like we don't want to do that to our users. But we do need to know if they spent 10 minutes on the credit card page trying to put their credit card number in and it kept failing. Um, and so that's the general like idea behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the session recording tools accidentally capture stuff when a field type was incorrectly set or whatever. Um, we've sometimes also used two other ones in addition to that. We used Fengui, which is like a kind of like a pre-heat map one, which does kind of a screenshot and tries to guess heat maps, and then a 5 second test, which you get an audience to look at homepage and say like, what do you think this site is about, and then it comes up with a keyword cloud. But they're
Oh
they're
yeah,
both.
there's a million tools out there that all do things. I think one thing just to keep in mind, right, is the more tech that you add into things, the harder it is to like centralize that in a way that makes sense. And so like that's why like we would try to keep our tech stack super simple because you can manage it very well. Whereas when you start adding in like we have full story for developers and we have like this for the like it just like becomes a complicated mess when you're solving for one problem, not the holistic solution. So we try as much as we can to be like, hey, let's cut down on the tech that we're adding and use a one tool that can do a lot of things and then yeah, go from there.
Yeah, and on that, I've seen good use cases where like a session identifier is combined with like Google Analytics 4 and like Hotjar or Clarity, and it's kind of like then you can kind of figure out like what exactly that person did, whereas like otherwise they're just split into different parts. So yeah, I can definitely see that being useful. And ironically, that helps with consent because you're then like grouping the user consent as well.
Exactly. It's like the the tale of like, hey, tell us you tell us who you are, and then we'll manage your consent, versus like, hey, we don't know who you are. We can't really manage your consent. Well, you're anonymous, but like we still are like tracking you. And so it's just again, if you can
Mm.
make a good reason for it, it makes the
Mm.
conversation a lot easier. So you can just cut off the pieces that are not needed. Uh, so.
Yeah, it's kind
uh,
of like you can't try and process a right to be forgotten request when you don't know who the person is.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know who you are. Or my favorite like hypothetical scenario on that is someone emails you, delete my stuff, and you say reply and said, I deleted you, and then they reply and say thanks. And I'm like, well, cool, now what? Like, do I delete this too? It's always a funny little scenario to run with lawyers. Uh,
I think that reminds me of what was it on Disney Plus? What's it? Loki series one where it's like this is everything we know about you, and the guy is saying everything, and then it's like typing the word everything.
yes.
Uh, the okay, cool. That's really cool, JJ. Some really good stuff, and I got some clients that definitely need to move away from segments. So I'm kind of interested to know about alternatives to that, and that post talk looks quite interesting. I'll definitely have to catch up with you later on that one and sort of find out how to connect that up. The so I'm just going to take over presenter control now, although I
Perfect.
will just put in the link to chat. So if attendees, if they could fill this in, obviously not just for access to the slides, but also to give JJ feedback. So I've just chucked that in chat for people to submit questions. Thank you so much for doing that talk, JJ. Some really good stuff in there. And
Thank you.
yeah, I liked how you structured that process in terms of kind of like data architecture and yeah, going beyond that kind of implementation to kind of data warehouse and then yeah, and I think it's a bit like you say, it's not just consent that needs to flow. It's like remember why you're doing it, like through the chain as well. The
Exactly.
um,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you so much.